I figured I'd do a little selfie format intro to this podcast episode, in line with the episode, which for the first time is a conversation between me and a close friend of mine, Jason Schwartz, who, like me, has gone really deep into the embodiment realm and has done so with a philosopher's lens, exploring all the depths and nuances and staying attuned to many of the sometimes confusing layers that occur on that journey. And in particular, we focus in on Contact Improv, which is a form that both of us have deepened into for a few years now, which is a really beautiful, profound laboratory for life. And there's no hiding from truth and all the pieces of truth inside of you that you don't necessarily want to face, as well as the truth of relating to others, your relational landscape. And more deeply than that, just the raw truth of life emerges, sometimes in challenging ways. So we dive really deep into that, and along the way we talk about our relationship to our breath and the profound importance of that. We touch on esoteric Christianity, Buddhism, and various other little topics along the way. And again, in line with this little intro here, is we also talk about the effects of video format on our embodied experience. Because for both of us, it's new, at least in the context of a conversation with a friend, to be witnessed by a video. So we dive into that as well, which I think is important in any long format video to touch on that a little bit, because there's, as we go into in this podcast episode, there's a lot around that we're all just taking for granted and not attuning to, that's actually having a really big impact on everybody, given how huge video has become as a means by which we connect to each other. So I'll leave it at that. Jump in and enjoy. I hope you enjoyed as much as me and Jason enjoyed making this podcast episode. And I'd love to hear from you in any way, shape, or form if anything resonates or you want to dive deeper in any specific part of it. So voila, enjoy, and I'll see you on the other side.
Cozy.
Yeah. Hey, good to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Well, we were just talking about bringing in video and how that changes the vibe of existing together.
Yeah.
So maybe that's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Maybe we can tune in for a second. Just feel like how the presence of the video is like affecting us. Yeah, something that was for me is like I was like smiling a lot. And I was forcing all my energy up into my head. It's like, being in video mode.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's almost like a fear of dropping the smile, Having my face being a more full range of expression. Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed the consciousness for sure. And what I was speaking about before we started recording, the breath and the relationship to the breath and self-consciousness. And for me, I think my tendency is, and I was noticing this when we just dropped in, tune in there, that when I feel a little bit self-consciousness or like I'm being observed or watched, there's a tendency to want to get smaller. And with that smallness, there's like a catching of the breath. And it gets a little more shallow.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just curious, like throughout this process, however long we have here, to like keep coming back to the breathing as like a metronome that keeps me in contact with whatever flow is in a given moment. So like the anxiety comes up, the fear comes up, whatever emotion comes up, but breathing with it rather than trying to like manage it in some particular way.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe let's start taking some deep breaths. tuning into the non-verbal communication that also happens. I mean, through video and audio, through the voice as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's the words, the content, you know, and I feel like in the podcast format or any video format, it's like that's the focus. It's like, and the like, you know, I don't know, the high energy flow, but there's also like deeper flows of communication that are happening, of what it means for us to be like in presence together with all those other layers active. Yeah.
Right.
Like attuning to those.
Right. Yeah. Do you find that when you're consuming podcasts, that you like to have video to watch of whoever you're watching?
I usually don't, actually. But maybe now I want to try that. Mainly just because I don't like listening to podcasts when I'm just watching. You know, I like doing something else, like driving or something. That's usually when I listen to podcasts.
Right.
So, but yeah, there's like, I mean, like so many things, I feel like the format of video is primarily hijacked by like floating heads. Like the floating heads format of communication.
Can you say more about what you mean by floating heads?
Like the content is the main communicator, and then the person's like charisma in communicating the content, you know. But it's like, again, it feels like this like energy flowing up here, and I'm like, there's like a desire to almost like emulate the like the high charisma, like head motion flow energy. And there's almost like this sense of like, I mean, the word coming to me is like flaccidness in like dropping out of that and into the body, and like kind of being softer and slower, and like probably our voice is less like animated in a cartoonish sense, you know, if we're in that place.
Yeah, interesting.
And like almost a sense of like unworthiness of communicating from that place, you know, like that has no place in the land of video and audio. So, yeah.
It's interesting that you say, I think you said less animated, when you allow yourself to drop into that more flaccid place. And for me, I feel like when I can settle in, the degree to which I settled in of like being less performative or having less of a mask on, that often allows me to be more expressive. So my tendency as a mask is to like, again, get smaller or like make myself more monotone. And so it's like this very like constrained mask of being a particular way. So if I can let that go, there's actually like more expression opens up. And I also get that feeling of like softness or like fluidity within that too.
That's juicy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if this resonates. That something that came to me is like the algorithm is like an indirect forcing function on our behavior. I mean, I feel like we're breaking through it right now in what we're doing. But part of what's coming up for me is there's this forcing function of like, whether, I don't know if it's necessarily the algorithm, but something technological that is entwined with the land of video and audio consumption that like amplifies content that like hooks you is like a forcing function on in this moment in a light way. And I feel like we're working through it right now, so it feels like not as alive.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if you're feeling that at all, or if that resonates, or if there's something else happening.
That last bit of you just naming working through it, whatever it is, feels like it resonates to me. And like, I don't know, that's cool. I think that's part of what, like I think I was saying before we hit record here, of like the practice. I get the discomfort or the self-consciousness in recording myself in any form, whether it's just audio, but also with video. And so seeing that, seeing that, oh, this is something that makes me uncomfortable. So how can I lean into this? There's something to learn here because I'm uncomfortable by it. So I really don't have a lot of practice or experience with it because of, I think, the fear of it. So it feels good to like be in the process, like the stumbly process of working through it. Like, okay, what are we doing? How do we load this thing?
Yeah, I mean, you're really good at that.
Thanks.
Yeah, the time I've known you, I feel like I've seen you do that quite often in really like fruitful ways. There's a lot of loops of self-reflection that happen as you go through it as well. You're not just like, you know, running into it because like for the sake of it. There's like all these loops of self-reflection. That's really inspiring. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I've been noticing there's quite some like particularly when you talk about being less constrained. You've been doing this like kind of this cool little like shoulder thing like this. Maybe this is too specific of a question, but I'm wondering if there's like anything that's coming up in you, like just about like what that shoulder flow is to you. And it doesn't have to be about this specific moment. It could be like, yeah, in any kind of sense.
Yeah, I think it's along those lines of like, to the extent that I'm holding the breath is just really like both an instance of, but also a metaphor for like a holding in my nervous system. So like noticing those moments of holding, and I feel like, I don't know, right now like I'm in this position with my legs crossed. There's not a whole lot of lower body mobility. So like, okay, how do I break like whatever the frame was that I was like thought I needed to hold?
Ooh, I like that. Yeah.
And just like, so this is like reminding myself that it's possible. Not that I need to be doing that the whole time, but that it's possible.
Oof, I love that. I mean, even as I was like kind of imitating it to ask you the question, I was like, oh, like, feels good. Yeah, it's like a very simple little thing, but it does like just bring the perfect amount of like flexible openness to the whole contraption. Yeah, it's really simple too, because I often think in terms of like big releases, or that's not true. I don't think in terms of big releases that often, but when I think of breaking out of a frame, I do tend to like, for that context specifically, go into a more dramatic place of like, you know, like a whole hour-long ecstatic dance in which I'm like writhing on the floor and you know, like having universe orgasms and like roaring and all that kind of stuff. So, but then on a day-to-day basis, I don't have that many tiny things like that I just like can just do in like 3 seconds. So I'm like, oh yeah, if I can literally just do that anytime, and it can help like break the frame in a big way. So, yeah. That brings me to like, how do you relate to those small things and those big things, and also their interconnection?
Good question.
The small moments and the big releases.
Yeah. Well, what you were just saying there reminds me of, again, the breath is so foreground for me right now and my creative exploration. But I've taught yoga. I've had a history of teaching yoga, and I've taught breath workshops. So I've done a fair bit of breath work, and that notion of like breath work. Well, now it's the time where you have a class, or you sit down in the workshop, or you sit down to do some breath work, and like that's where you're doing it. And there are benefits there for sure. But where my curiosity is alive in myself right now is like, what is the breath work that's woven through my life? And it's sort of been humbling, like I was mentioning before, to realize I haven't integrated this breathing stuff nearly to the degree that I thought that I had. And it's pretty regular occurrence. Well, I'll notice myself feeling hooked, or my breath being caught throughout the day-to-day. So I hear that and what you're describing as the smaller moments. So that's where my leaning is right now in terms of practice, is like, how do I bring that practice into every day in every way? And it sounds like this trite thing, it's so cheesy thing, but I think there's so much juice there, especially as someone who has leaned toward like wanting that catharsis experience, and like needing something to be like big and massive for it to feel impactful. So yeah, in service of breaking out of that frame and moving into like, well, it's always here. That the possibility to break frame and be in flow is in every single moment. And this is sort of another thread that I'm happy to get into too, but perhaps the extent to which I'm not in that flow, I'm holding my breath, is the extent to which I'm inviting suffering or injury, which is sort of why it's alive for me right now.
Yeah, I have 2 questions that are interrelated coming. First, as you mentioned, like my breath is hooked or caught, and so I immediately had the curiosity, like, what is it being hooked by or caught on? Yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, I appreciate you highlighting that word, hooked. So it feels important to me to like maybe like zoom back out and do some term defining, like frame, for instance, because that's a word we've used a few times.
Right.
And so I think of frame as like not just how I'm seeing something, say like my mental image of something, but like my entire sensory motor frame. So like my frame is my embodiment in a given moment.
Almost your literal frame, like your body's
yeah.
skeletal frame and muscular frame.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Which includes my thought process and all of those models, but it's also larger than that too.
Right, and they're inevitably intertwined as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Very much so. So that's a frame. So we always have a frame, and those frames are always shifting and changing. And in some sense, how I think about myself, whatever I consider Jason to be, that's a frame too. And I feel curious about the ways in which I'm hooked as Jason, of like, this is the frame that I'm seeing through, and this is the frame that I have to see through, or unconsciously I'm like connected to. And the moments in my life where I felt unhooked from that have felt like some of the most liberating or like joyful or expansive moments. And that's not to say that the frame of Jason is wrong or bad, but again, opening up the possibility that I don't have to play that frame. And the have to is where, to circle back, that it feels like getting hooked. It's when it feels like I have to do something, consciously or unconsciously.
Right. This was like a really juicy, embodied way of describing like the whole thing with ego, like entrapment and ego creating suffering that a lot of religions talk about as well. And then unhooking, decoupling from the ego, not dissolving it because it's still there and it's still there. Like it's just part of, like inevitably part of your being, because it's like intrinsic to being human that there is that like construct in some form, but like just uncoupling from it, and like your consciousness is larger than it, and it's like part of the ongoing flow of experience versus like being completely enveloped in it. Like I really like that word hooked actually to describe it. You're like hooked into it versus you're like around it, and it's like almost like, you know, a womb with a baby in it. It's like the ego is like just floating in the womb. But the womb is larger, and it's not like, you know, there's the umbilical cord, there's that connection, but it's not intrinsic or like encompassing, like you're not within the ego construct.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, and to the point that you're making, like you need the frame to have an experience. You can't just having zero frame is like this non-dualist experience, which I'm not actually speaking from experience there, so I want to be clear there. But like my understanding of that is that when people have this non-dualist experience, there is no frame anymore, but there's also no experience. It's like a cessation experience.
Right.
That's how it's described in Buddhism, I believe. So the frame is necessary to live, but it's just about like, am I choosing this frame?
Yeah, that reminds me of the Christian tarot, which is a super random thing, but not actually random thing to bring up, which has been a while, but I was just talking to somebody the other day about it who knew a lot about it. So I brought it back into my awareness. And it's really interesting to read because it's like esoteric Christianity, and it has a lot of similarities to Buddhism and other religions. Like it feels like the purer form of Christianity below pure is not the right word, but the more kind of primal or the more like grounded version of Christianity below the like all the layers of the colonized structure of Christianity that like we're surrounded by. But the thing I really like about it is it's actually not about this, what you're saying, the cessation of experience, like I feel like which the Buddhist tradition, and the way I think about it is like Eastern traditions are more collective societies, so there's more of an ease and desire to go towards the like kind of dissolution of the self, whereas in the Western tradition, in for example in this Christian tarot, like esoteric Christianity, a lot of it is about like just being fully absorbed in experience, and you are unhooking as well, but you're still in it. And it talks a lot about like, you know, crying and like suffering like as an experience that is really full and alive. So yeah, and it just really, when I read that, it really kind of opened my mind to like the lineage that I'm in or the culture I'm in, whatever, there's a strength there as well in like kind of immersing in experience with the self, but not hooked into the ego, where it's like what you're saying, it has to be a certain way and the breath is contracted. There's this like opening into it, but we're not releasing from it and seizing experience. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it gets kind of fuzzy to talk about this, you know, like, because it's all so far away from the representational realms. So I'm like, even as I'm saying it, I'm like, oh, this feels like I'm not quite saying it right. And I don't know if I ever could, but hopefully that kind of touches on it enough.
Yeah.
To communicate it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, there's a lot of different directions we could go from here. I feel curious about like the distinction between Eastern and Western there. A practice that I've recently gotten into and have been sort of in and out of is the practice of Jhana meditation. And that's a lesser known type of meditation from the Buddhist tradition, which is much more about like what's I've heard referred to as wet insight versus dry insight.
Wet insight.
Yeah, so dry insight would be like something like notice the truth of your reality, like right now, like the sort of vipassana insight, like everything is empty approach and just going directly there. Whereas wet insight is like cultivating these subtler and subtler ways of seeing, which are actually deeply pleasurable and joyous and blissful, and like going that direction. So like more into like the sensory experience. And it's interesting that like that practice, at least in my understanding, has been less popularized in the East. And I think there's a complex web of like cultural reasons for why that is, but something about something about repression of pleasure, or like less interest in the sensory world, the experience. Somehow like seeing that as lesser.
Yeah.
And that happens in both the East and the West too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that reminds me of two things. One is David Data. Do you know him?
I've heard of him, but I'm not familiar.
Yeah, and the other is Bill Plotkin. Have you heard of Bill Plotkin?
Yeah.
He's awesome. Yeah.
Loosely familiar.
Yeah, well, they both have that. Maybe I'll go with the Bill Plotkin one. That one feels a bit more resonant. And the Data is a distinction between like art, presence, and healing. And that like presence, and his form of art is like sexual depth. And he says like presence and art are like independent. And you can be super present but not have developed art. So it's the same thing. Like you can be really present but not have like this deep immersion in sensory experience. And you can also have a deep immersion in sensory experience and be very like masterful in that full flow, but not have as much presence, and they're like separate skills to develop. And then the Plotkin way is that many religions are transcendent focused towards, he does like spirit versus soul, which is kind of arbitrary, like you could use any words for it. And he acknowledges that as well, but like spirit is more like you're kind of dissolving into the full the like universal consciousness and like losing yourself, you know, like your capital S self, becoming part of the flow of being. And it's very upwards, transcendent focus, and like release. And then soul is more about going down and deep into yourself and finding your own unique imprint and being like kind of fully immersed in that and discovering your unique gifts. And so it's a way of kind of going deeper into the self. And in a way, you're also transcending that like ego that you get hooked on that you were describing, but in a different direction. And he says the two are like ultimately complementary and synergistic,
right?
But like in the initial stages, they can look quite different. And that really resonated with me, with that downward aspect. Feels really juicy and alive for me.
Yeah.
In a way that if I'm just the transcendent on its own, to me just feels like a thing I'd be forcing, because it's like, that is the spiritual thing to do, you know, but like it doesn't quite, my heart is not quite like being drawn to just that, but whereas with the soul descent, it is very drawn to that. And then also the spirit in synergy, but if it's just the spirit, I feel this like emptiness there, for me personally. And, you know, I'm sure maybe I'm just not like deep enough into it to like feel the richness of it as well. So I don't want to like just dismiss that whole thing offhand, but just speaking from my personal experience, I really feel that depth. And I feel like a big part of that is going into the sensory kind of bliss experience of your specific being and like the contours of your frame, you could say as well. How that is like aligning in all the different ways with the energies around you and within you, and like the abundance of like life and nature just like flowing through you. So
Yeah, cool. Again, I'm reminded of the breathing aspect of that, of like when you were describing the like around you and through you. There's something beautiful about the breath, and that it's connecting you to what's around and through you always. So and like
right.
You're like shifting your frame in attention with the breath, and something about that frame is including all the other possible frames, that like the web that you're swimming into, like literally, materially, and also you can think about it metaphorically. But it's like,
because it's literally the substance from outside coming in. You mean, or
yeah,
right,
yeah. And so like all this to me, one way I think of it is it's all movement. There's like this arising and falling of something in a background, in a field.
Right.
Everything has a beginning, everything has an end. So in that process of beginning and ending, there has to be movement. Otherwise, there's no appearance. So with the breathing, it's like, for me, it's something about like bringing in like the stream, to the extent there's a stream of like all of this is moving together. It's like, oh yeah, I'm connected to the stream, rather than the breathing is when it's holding, I'm separate. I'm like this poor little thing that's separate from the world and trying to protect myself from whatever that flow of things is.
Yeah.
So not only the flow within me, but the flow within me within the flow of the larger context of the river.
Right. Yeah, I feel like stream entry, it's one of the terms used when you like enter the flow of consciousness. And yeah, there it is, like the stream of the web of life and being. I feel like death feels really wrapped up with this whole thing as well. Like with the holding, and just in Western society in general, like this fear of death. And like, there was a post I read once by this guy who was like an end-of-life nurse practitioner or something, and he was talking about like the cult of life, that the Western healthcare system is like, has this like neurotic obsession with life, where people are like literally like suffering like crazy, like, thousands of dollars a day to like just keep them functional, but they're like a fucking potato, like they're not even present, or they're present and suffering hugely, and like they're definitely gonna die, like there's no possible way to keep them alive, but they're like kept alive, and it's like there's just nothing there except like this like obsession with life and this terror of death. And then all the a lot of the Western religions are built on like death is not real as like a fundamental premise. Like you continue, your ego is preserved basically, and goes to heaven, and you stay as your ego. So like that hooking, it gives you more comfort in the hooking, and like nullifies the knowledge that you have intrinsically that hook is gonna disappear. The thing you're hooking into is gonna disappear someday when you die. And then I feel like a lot of that holding is also the fear of death comes into that, both the literal actual fear of death, and then the layers that are like subtler versions of that, of change, and like the miniature deaths throughout life of change, and and your frame changing, like who you're with, or like relationship ends, or you move, or like there's we had like Hurricane Helene, like the natural disasters, or like just the context of a war or whatever. There's just all these things that happen, or even just micro, family member dies or whatever. There's all these things that happen that like just like bring a fundamental shift to your state, and there's like this fear of that, and I feel like a lot of the holding is related to that, and there's this like fear of death, this like living at the root there. And is kind of reified by society and like amplified in all these ways.
Right.
As it like all these ways to amplify your own fear of death and avoid ever looking at it. Down to, again, like literally keeping people alive, like for no reason, way past the moment in which there's any like soul juice to it for anybody. You know what I mean? I don't know if that last part made sense, but
no, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah.
I've seen it.
Cool. Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, I just want to anchor us a little more in talking about your contact improv practice, because as I understand it, that's like your main. You probably wouldn't word it this way, but your main like philosophical practice through which you like connect to the truth, your own truth, and the truth of being. not in the abstract sense, but like, what is the truth of being alive and of existence? So I feel like you have there's such depth in how you relate to it. So I just want to kind of bring it to that, and maybe we can just share a bit more about maybe what it is for people that don't know about it, as you experience it, and how you got to it and how you relate to it now on that journey.
Cool. Yeah, definitely. So juicy. So contact improv, it's one of those practices that if you ask 10 different practitioners what it is, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Right.
One way I like to think about it is that it's a practice of improv dance. It's an improvisational dance practice that's exploring the principles of relationality in and through the human body. So what that looks like in practice is a lot of like weight sharing and back and forth, and it's a dance where there's no particular form to it, but there is a basic grammar to it, and that grammar I would say is predicated on the physics of the human body in relation to gravity. So there are certain positions that make sense that people will often find themselves in, and there's like infinite possibilities in terms of how two or more people can relate. And the practice is relatively new. I believe it was Steve Paxton in the 60s where it first started getting developed. And there was this interesting choice, as I understand it, where there wasn't a movement to like codify it or structure it or make it something that you could get licensed in. So now, whatever it is, 60 years later, we're in this, and I'm relatively new to the practice, so this is speaking from not a ton of experience, but it seems like my understanding of the community is that we're trying to figure out like, what is this thing? Like, what is contact improv and what is it not? And like, is it worth protecting some tradition here versus like anything goes and anything's contact improv?
Something I've heard before and also experienced myself, share my own experience with it, is like the physics branch and the sensuality branch. Because you reference like the basic grammar of the physics of the human body. And from what I understand, like in the early days, it was more physics focused and a lot of like older school. There's even two jams in Asheville that kind of map onto that distinction. Like one is more physics based. And I mean, physics not in like a cold clinical sense, like it's still very juicy and embodied and flowy, but a lot of it is on like the pure exploration of the deliciousness of like being in the physics of two human bodies together, and the relationality of that. And there's a lot of layers of like, you know, spiritual relationality and emotional relationality in that as well. But it's still primarily focused on like that kind of the flow of the dance in its smoothness, and sometimes not in its smoothness, but like that focus. And then the sensuality side is a bit more like the central pillar is like full spectrum relationality, including the sensual. It's not like, oh, we're just gonna be sexual for the sake of it, but it's like that there's more space for like sensuality to arise, and it's more anchored in that relationality, and the dance is a way to cultivate it and amplify it. And I've experienced, and of course it's fuzzy and you can get both, and it's not like a clear dichotomy, but I'm just curious if you've experienced that spectrum or those distinctions, and how that lives in you. Or if it even does.
Yeah, I mean, well, as it relates to the Asheville jams, it does seem like there's like an old school jam and more of a new school jam, just to put that like a broad stroke on that. Yeah, it's what's coming up for me is I'm a person who likes rigor. And so if I get into like a dance environment where like there's tradition and there's practice behind it, but it's sort of like, well, anything goes, and we're just kind of like connecting to our sensuality here. There's value in that. There's value in those sorts of spaces, but I think it leaves a lot of the juice behind. to not learn the basic grammar, because there's something like you could just like pick up an instrument that you've never played before and be like, oh, I'm expressing myself on this instrument.
Right.
And sure, to some extent you are, but if you learn how to play the instrument and then you express yourself, it's a whole different order of expression.
Right. Yeah.
And similarly, with something like contact improv and dance, like you can get in there the first time and be like, I'm expressing myself in this sensual experience. Like we all, to some degree, know how to live in a body. But if you like learn to play the instrument and learn in the sense that you're learning the scales, the basic grammar, then there's a whole different world of play and possibility that opens up.
Yeah.
So for my part in things, I want to cultivate that in myself as an individual, but also would love to participate in the communities that are also interested in that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel you on that, yeah. Yeah, that resonates for me with my own experience of learning dance, including contact, and just, there's like, and also in intellectual realms, like when that was more my focus, and it still is to some extent in more limited realms, but there, when you get to, it's not just like a bonus or something, like, oh, there's a bonus of being more skilled. It's like, it's literally a whole new universe opens when you like reach a certain level of mastery that you couldn't even see from before. You know, you could maybe slightly just taste that it was there, but you didn't even know it was there until you're in it. And you actually reached some level of mastery. And it's like a whole new world that is like as vast as your entire previous world. Actually vaster than your entire previous world. And just that in and of itself is so pleasurable to then just be exploring within that space. Does that resonate with what you're saying? Like, does that feel like in line with where you were going?
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, totally.
Just trying to map it on, see if that's like the same shared experience there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And it brings me back to the conversation about frame too. Of like, I think there's two things that come up for me. Yeah. One, and they're related. One is flow states, and two is frame breaking and frame making again. I think contact in particular is a rich practice for frame breaking and frame making. It's sort of like built into the DNA of the practice.
Right.
Because intentionally there's no lead and follow in the dance for one.
Right.
It's improvisational. There is performance, but performance is within the context of improvisation.
Right.
And so there's this theme from the teachers that I've learned from of deconstruction that sort of lives through the practice of contact improv. Like you're always looking to how you can deconstruct.
Right.
And my understanding of flow states, like one way of sort of like fostering and furthering flow states, it's this, you're learning how to break the frame that you were in and then make a new frame that more accurately maps to reality. And so it's this constant process of frame breaking and frame making to the point where you get this optimal grip on what's happening in your reality, and then there's like this hypersalience where there's no attentional leaks, I'm only here, I'm in the zone.
Fuck yeah.
And then it's like this deep sense of participation with reality as it is. And that can show up in so many different ways in so many practices, but there's something about contact I find that DNA of deconstruction really just opens it up, and the flow that's possible there is on like the full bodied relational level. Especially when you're flowing with someone else too, because then you get the feedback of that person. It's like you're flowing in whatever the relationality of physics is. And that's just deeply pleasurable. And this is another direction we can go. I think it's in service of cultivating cognition and wisdom too.
Oh my God, that was so beautiful. I love that so much. Yeah, it's like the physics is seen in the like sciences as like the kind of, in many ways, the fundamental layer, you know, and then you have other layers on top. You know, like biology is higher than physics in the sense of like it's more distant from the most fundamental layer and has extra layers of complexity. So I like that it's kind of, in a way, that's translating here where like the contact improv is a way to feel the physics of your frame. So, you know, you can think about it all you want, or you're doing yoga, or you're, whatever on your own, like, but then when you're in the physics, the raw physics of your body in relation to another body, there's like a more purity to it in a way, as like that. This is the purity of reality, like in and of itself, and then just being able to attune to that.
Yeah.
Gosh, a thing that's coming, or unless you have a thought on that.
Go for it.
Yeah, a thing that's coming up for me. This is a thing that I've grappled with for years with contact, and I have a lot of different answers, and I also have no answers. Like it's been like an ongoing, rich exploration, which is its relationship to intimacy, because I don't mean physical intimacy. I mean like emotional, heart and soul intimacy. Because in the first 2 years, I would say, of my contact journey, I had trouble connecting with people that I was dancing with in like a personal sense. Like the dances would be amazing and really connected, but then the conversation wouldn't really go somewhere. And it was this eerie feeling of like, we just shared such a deep connection, but now we're like kind of awkwardly talking, and I can't really like feel you really in this realm.
So these were conversations after the dances?
Yeah, exactly. Just with like people in the communities I was with. And Asheville is quite different in that. Like I feel like there's more integration, and but it's still just been this ongoing question of like, and especially like in the kind of origins of it, I've always felt this like slight, because of the focus on the physics, is there an overriding of like almost like boundaries or something? I'm just kind of like phrasing it as I'm talking, so we can go wherever you want with this, but like it's just so intimate to have that kind of dance with somebody. Like it's almost like you're one way of putting it is like you're exploring the root of reality together, like what you were saying, in this like relational dynamic, and there's just this raw presence to like exactly what's happening, and it's just so intimate for me, at least. And then it's always been weird to me to like do that with somebody I don't necessarily know that well, and then not have like kind of a follow-up connection. And then also in the other direction, like it's kind of a conundrum, because then on the other hand, I don't quite feel like truly like soul linked with somebody until like we've been in a contact improv flow together of some form.
You said you don't feel like you've been in that soul linked way until you've had that sort of dance?
Yeah, like even if I'm really connected, so like we have a lot of great conversations, and we're physically well connected, like through physical intimacy, or like through playing sports together, or whatever it is, or like through art, and all the layers of intimacy. But then if there's something that like more fully clicks when I'm in a contact improv flow, it doesn't even have to be contact improv in a formal sense, but like we're in an improv dance flow together where we're like we're fully focused and attuned to reality, like together, and the relational flow in that, and all the layers that emerge. Because as you were saying, it's like almost like a spanning set on all relationality. Like all your patterns come up, you know what I mean? Like in all these like unavoidable physical ways. So yeah, it's a conundrum in both directions, because it's like, does it make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the conundrum of the connection to somebody in a contact improv flow that's not then fused in other forms of connection, and conversely connections I have that are not fused into that form of connection. So yeah, I'll keep it at that. That's just a big thing that I've been exploring over the years and don't have good answers to yet. I'm curious if that resonates with you, first of all, and like, any thoughts you have coming up, or experiences.
Definitely resonates. You said a lot there. One thing I made a note of is like having a connection with someone, say at a jam, at a dance, and then not having the verbal connection afterward, or like not having the debrief. That absolutely resonates. Like I remember when I was first getting into contact. Well, I'll rewind a little bit more. So I think I went to my first jam like 6 years or so ago in Portland, Oregon. And it was cool. Like, I loved it. I loved like seeing what everyone else was doing, and like wanted to show up in it. And I did. But there's a lot of fear for me. Like it scared me so much just to show up at all. And I did, and it was fine. But there was like a hangover after that, for the few days afterward, of like Like, I don't know if I can show up for that again. And it was another 4 years, I think, before I showed up to another jam.
The long hangover.
It was a long hangover. And there's like a lot of like other stuff. It wasn't just like I was chewing on whether or not I can go to a jam for 4 years,
Right.
but there was a lot of fear to work through. Like, I felt like I had to work through some of my own emotional attachment dynamics before I could show up in a place and feel comfortable showing up at a jam. And it's not to say then I got rid of the fear and then I started showing up to jams. It just, I got to a certain point where it's like, okay, I have the capacity in myself to show up and hold myself in the process. And I remember, so this is why it's coming up in relation to what you said. I remember I think it was the first jam back where I had a dance with a person. It was a woman. And like, it felt good to me. Like, it just felt like, okay, I'm doing contact. And at one point she left the dance and didn't acknowledge leaving the dance. And like,
Right.
I knew that was like a part of the form, that you just leave and don't acknowledge it, but it still activated this part in me, like this attachment part in me, like, wait, like, you're going to dance with someone else? And then there's always like this awareness of her throughout that dance, like, oh, like, where is she in the room? And like, we had some sort of like emotional relationship. And over the years of going to jams more regularly now, like that experience, it doesn't come up, or at least if it comes up, it feels like much more light. So anyhow, just saying, like, that's been my experience too, and there's been this want in me to be like, I think there is a place, or I would like for there to be a place where there is like the exploration of physics, or say like whatever, like the raw material of relationality is in the dance floor, and then there are spaces afterward, whether it's a practice like circling or authentic relating verbally, where like we can talk through the dynamics that have come up for us in the practice of dance. And I haven't experienced that to this point in time, where there are those spaces that are including both. But I think there's such an opportunity there, and I think it would be remiss to say like, oh, it's just about the physics, so like leave your emotions, like leave yourself at home, because that just feels like it's ignoring the reality of what's actually present there. But there's something about like there is also something about making the distinction between the two as well, rather than just having them all getting like wrapped up in the same soup together.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the last piece about the distinction, because it can get real swampy. You know what I mean? If it's like a little too intertwined. I've been in contexts like that as well, which are like maybe too far on the other side of like the not having the intimacy, and then the other side is like we're circling all the time, we're doing contact improv, and like it's all getting a little too enmeshed, and there's like you lose some of the like the freedom and authenticity of the dance if it gets too enmeshed, and like it's a component of the relationship, the way that talking is. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I've had moments like that as well.
Yeah, it feels, there's something that's coming up in hearing you say that, of again back to the theme of deconstruction and contact, and getting unhooked. Like that sense of feeling unhooked is one that comes up for me in contact, which I love. But there's this maybe a paradox in which I'm like, there's this intention to let go of myself when I'm showing up, like letting go of the drama of Jason, and also in some way like still participating in it. But I just, in the practice, I feel this invitation toward like letting go of myself, while also honoring that those things are going to come up that are like Jason's attachment stuff is going to come up. And then at some point, not like during the dance, like needing to like stop and have a conversation about it, but at some point circling back around and be like, oh, this was something that came up in that context. But yeah, something about the invitation of like, okay, we're still the animals we are showing up in a jam, but how do we like leave apart like the notion that like we're looking to like connect or like meet a partner or meet like a sexual partner or something like that. Like that's not on the table.
Right.
And so there's the words feel challenging, but there's something about like the mutual intention in the context being having some sort of purity to it, being like the orientation is toward the physics. And then having the opportunity later to see like what came up in that field, what came up in that more pure, raw physical field. Emotional stuff came up.
Right.
Let's digest that together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's from what we're talking about, it feels like almost a village practice in its ideal form. Like,
Sure.
where you're in a shared context. I don't mean it doesn't have to be like a literal village, like we have the town square and stuff like that, but like we're just in a consistent shared context of relationality that is not like super deep with everybody. You know, we don't have to be like best friends with everybody, but there's like some shared context that we're like regularly encountering each other at a variety of events, and we're also doing some extent of like sharing our lives together in terms of like food or ritual, like shared rituals. You know, there's like some loose container that is uniting us as a village. And then we're doing contact improv practice within that, and then I feel like there's just naturally more space for like, you know, at the next event we see each other, or like after there's a potluck after, and we're like talking about what came up at the dance for us in like kind of a casual context. It feels like it would almost be built in at that point. Yeah. And then there'd be also something about like, feels like maybe a good layer of relationality where like you're part of my village. So that feels like enough of an intimacy container to like not have that weirdness that I was talking about of like, I don't know you, but we're having this deep connection. But it's still like, there's enough distance as well that you can be kind of more purely in the exploration. But I mean, as I'm describing, I'm like, that kind of is fairly good description of my life in Asheville. You know, like I feel like there's this broader like 1,000-person community that is decently enough in that kind of village vibe. Not quite as much as I would like, but like, you know, you can't have everything perfect, but it's quite solid, you know. And especially when I leave Asheville, I'm like, oh my God, it's awesome here. And like, that is actually so amazing and rare to have that kind of larger village community vibe. And then I feel like there are certain people that I do have like a more pure, juicy dance connection with, and there's no expectations of it being more or like messy in that way. And it's just such a delicious flow whenever I'm dancing with them. So it's funny, I was like stating like my fantasy reality for what this would be like, and I was like, I'm kind of living that already, you know, when I think about it, yeah, and when I feel into it, it's like, yeah. I think I'm just not leaning into it as much as I would like, which is a me thing, like, just, this is a whole, I mean, I'm kind of, with that fear, I'm kind of in a moment right now where that fear is kind of alive for me.
Which fear?
Because it's been a while since I've been to, like, a pure contact improv jam. I do a lot at ecstatic dances, but it's been a while since I've been to a jam, and I'm just not as good as I used to be in terms of the grammar that you were talking about. So there's a bit of a, like, embarrassment almost, like, and I can feel that I used to be more in the mastery universe of this, at least some layers, obviously not like master level, but like enough that I could feel the whole universe and play in it. And now there's some kind of embarrassment and shame that I'm not like quite there anymore in the same way. So that's been inhibiting me from like just stepping more fully into what's already there, which is there's 2 jams a week, and there's this like kind of village vibe already that is actually really perfect for this, like the balance of intimacy that we've been talking about.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all that.
It was a bit of a ramble, sorry, but
no, it's okay.
Hopefully there's some nuggets there.
Yeah, I mean, in that last bit that you were sharing there, I just I hear the fear, and I know that sense of shame in myself, and I feel like I'm not the dancer I want to be. It still definitely comes up for me in moments, and I also just like I hear such a rich opportunity for growth there. What is it to show up and not be what you once were, or not be whatever the dancer you think you should be is. And there's a vulnerability in that. It's like just showing up in a relationship, whatever the relationship is, and be like, this is what I am right now.
Yeah. I mean, that's speaking of that holding, and, you know, that we're talking about with the breath, and like kind of hiding yourself from coming back to the death thing, even like hiding from like a little death that's happened, like certain, and I mean, it can come back, so it's really a minor death, you know, in the grander scheme of things, of like that skill level that I once had, like, and the death, and just being like, that's the reality right now, and that's part of life.
And hearing you speak there, I wonder about like you naming like the minorness of the death, and what was coming up is like, say my experience of a few years ago and my dance partner leading the dance. And some part of like the young part of me, it's like, oh, don't go. And like there's like a little death in that of like the infant whose parent left and they think their whole world is collapsing. They think it's all over.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm like wondering about like that fear of death, and this could get like pretty like esoteric and out there, but looking at it from just a pretty brass facts like human developmental lens, like how much of that comes from infancy and just like the moment of being out of the womb, maybe leaving the womb, or being out of the womb in the moment where like your parent's gone for the first time, and like that object impermanence and being like, this is really scary.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's another direction. But I feel like that shows up in perhaps in Contact too, where it's like this fear of like being left because I'm not good enough, or like being judged as not being good enough, and so then being distanced from, and that feeling like a death of some sort to a young part of me.
Right.
And so a word that I've often used for the Contact practice is confronting. It's super confronting. You can't like, my experience of being at ecstatic dance, which in moments I love and have had, I found a lot of value and connection in ecstatic dance. So I don't mean to put it down unequivocally, but there's the possibility if you're just kind of twinkle toesing your way around the dance floor in a way that like you're not really like meeting your shit.
Right.
Whereas with Contact, my experience has been like, you're gonna meet your stuff. Like it's gonna come up. And that's part of the beauty of the practice and why it feels so scary too. Yeah.
And on top of it, you're meeting your shit in relation with somebody else, so like that's a whole extra layer of vulnerability that's showing up there. And like they can feel it, like you know, if a shadow shows up like in a verbal conversation, it's like kind of ambiguous, you know, and it's like, oh, did people notice, or it's like, did that happen, or we can pretend it didn't happen, or you know, there's a lot of layers, or we can lean into it, but there's a bit more choicefulness and freedom there. Whereas in a contact improv dance, if it shows up, it's like boom, like you're literally like flying over them or something, you know, like they feel it, or like you drop the weight, or you're leaning too much, or whatever. I mean, there's a billion things, you know, like, and it's just right there. And for me, that was always like, yeah, confronting is a great word, and still is. Like, there's just like, I cannot hide that this just happened, and I can't hide from the fact that they just are feeling it happen right now in relationality. And then there's a trust that has to come. Like, I'm not going to be abandoned, or I'm not going to like lose my sense of belonging because this shadow part of me just showed up. Without being hidden or fuzzed in this dance. Just it's coming out for me now is just like the willingness to show up and be incompetent or look silly or make a mistake. Those are all words for me of like things that I've shied away from in the past, or I've been afraid of, and that they still, not just in the past, like present, they're still like learning edges for me. And I again feel the invitation of that practice into those learning edges. And again, I'm thinking about the breath, for all the metaphor it provides, but also like the physical reality of it, and showing up in contact dances and bringing my awareness to the breath, and how often it happens that I'm holding my breath. Yeah, in the dance.
In the dance.
Yeah. True.
And I might like look like I'm flowing to some degree, or to like the outside observer might see that. But for me, it might feel like this really contracted experience. And it might manifest as back pain the next day or later on. Which has been my experience too.
Right.
So again, like it feels like a necessity for me to bring in the awareness of the breath, for instance, but also like to go through these confronting practices. Because if I don't, then it's submitting myself to, or subjecting myself to the life of suffering, or like the same problems. They just come out, they catch me from behind, rather than just like facing at them directly. And so
Right, they're there anyways.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a navel gazing. Oh, it's a nice to have activity. It feels like this is the work that I'm here to do.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and I had a dance teacher once where like we flowed. It was like how to dance from the breath, where the breath is like the guiding energy, and you're following the waves of your own breath, and it was so transformative. I mean, first of all, it helped me realize like the same thing. Like I am kind of overriding my breath almost often with the flow, and I'm like, that's my natural, which is just common in society in general. Like the breath is like such a kind of clear ground point almost of our like repression of our natural impulses, like not following the flows of our breath, and then just having that show up in the dance as well. And like when you let your breath guide you, there's this like expansiveness that comes, and this like ease and grace, and in the sense of the contact dance, like a greater attunement, because there's, I mean, yeah, as you were saying, it's like the outside world coming in, and not just metaphorically, but almost literally, it creates the greater attunement for me to the other parts of the outside world, like the other humans that I'm sharing the dance with.
Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, what if I was to show up to a practice, to a jam, and be like, the form here, whatever shows up in the movement, is just in service of me practicing with the breath.
Ooh.
Like the breath is highest.
Ooh.
So
it'd be cool to have a whole jam where everybody like had that shared commitment, and we just
right. And it could just mean like everyone lying on the floor and breathing, but so long as like that's the thing you're coming back to.
Yeah.
That could feel like deep flow also.
Yeah. Okay. All right, we could keep going for hours, but for the sake of time and
sure,
our own energy, we can wrap it up there.
Cool.
Thanks, dude. That was beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun.
That was delicious.
I'd be happy to do it again at some point.
Yeah, me too.
Feel some flow.
Yeah. Yeah. For like a closing hug.
Sure.
Feels like an important part as well.